Hey, what's up, everyone? How is everyone doing today? Everyone doing all right? Hey, you know what? It's almost spring break over here in my district. So, actually, we live really close to Augusta, where the Augusta National was being held this upcoming week. And so, in the district where I teach, they always do spring break in conjunction with the Augusta National because so many teachers and so many students, as well as other people, will just take the week off and work a little side job and make sometimes thousands of dollars. Driving. I used to work for a driving company. So, how are we doing in Brighton? Emmanuel, is it Niger, and Nicholas, everyone. So, I want to go ahead and get started, but we got a lot we're going to talk about today. We're going to be looking at urban locations. So we're moving into Unit 7. That's good news, y'all, because that means we're getting really close to the end of the AP season, okay? Your AP exam is on May the 14th at noon, if I'm not mistaken. I looked it up recently. And so we got to do what we got to do to get as close to that as possible. And one of the things I wanted to ask you was, how many of y'all have done a practice test for the AP exam? Put in the comments if you've taken a practice test, please. Nope. Anyone else done a practice test of any kind? So just to kind of tell you what I'm getting at, for me, I always would give a practice test about this time to my students, and we would take it all collectively. I'd have them all come after school. We take the test, and then we get it graded as soon as you possibly could. And this is really a very important part of the process of preparing for the AP exam. But one other thing. A weird echo. Is anybody else seeing a weird echo? Is it echoing? Let me see if I can make it. Is it better now? All right. Hopefully, because my setup is about the same. So maybe my mic was too close. I was trying to watch out for my cat nap here. All right. So as an instrumentalist, I play the cello. One thing that I would never want to do is be a soloist at a concert that I didn't prepare for. Wait a second. What if I went to all the practices? Well, that's great, but if I don't practice on my own, then I'm not going to be prepared for the solo. So I say all that to say, a lot of times teachers will give practice tests, whether they do or whether they don't. You definitely need to take it upon yourself right now, as soon as possible, this next week or two, and take a practice test. And I'll tell you why. Because the first thing I want to tell you today is, at this point, you need to start identifying what your weaknesses are in preparation for the test. There are going to be certain units that you feel like, wow, I was awesome at population. I know this stuff frontwards and backwards. I don't need to spend as much time on this stuff. But maybe that agriculture unit is a little bit new and different for me. So maybe I need to spend a little bit extra time practicing multiple choice and learning some of the vocab and doing some FRQs. So where do you take them? That's a really good question. What I would do if I were you is I would ask your teacher if they have some kind of practice for multiple choice or FRQ. If you go onto the College Board website, you can access all of the previous FRQs. At this point, y'all need to know that. And so if you Google AP Human Geography FRQ tests, it will pull up the page. It's a very public page with all of the previous FRQs there. So don't look at the rubric, but actually answer some of the questions and then grade yourself with the rubric in the same way that we did a few weeks ago when I showed y'all how to model the FRQ. For the multiple choice, ask if your teacher has some practice for you. If your teacher does not, then I highly recommend, like right now, as soon as possible, go and get on Amazon or go to your bookstore or wherever, if those even still exist around your area, and get a review manual that's got a practice test in it. Kaplan, Princeton Review, I mentioned all these a little while ago. These are going to be excellent sources for practice tests that also have a key. They also have a key attached to it. So you're going to want to go and practice those questions and see where you're weakest. And you'll be able to go through unit for unit. This will give you some degree of guidance as to where you need to prioritize when you're studying. All right. So I wanted to make sure I said that because I hadn't said it in a while. I don't know if I really explicitly said that, but make sure that you guys are taking it upon yourselves to get that review. And with no further interruptions, I want to go ahead and get started with the presentation. All right. I say with no further interruptions, there actually is one more thing that I'm going to tell you, and that is I am going to have ACL reconstruction surgery on Tuesday. All right. So yes, it's my spring break, and yes, it's gonna be terrible because I'm gonna be hurting. So I say that we're still gonna be having Thursday night reviews, but the next couple of nights, Miss Amanda, the owner of Findable, who has taught AP Human Geography and also hosts the AP World, is going to fill in for me on those nights. So please make sure that you're here and know that that's going to happen, but don't be alarmed when it's not me. All right. So now the memberships for Findable Plus are $35. Our objectives that we're going to do is, let's see, bro. Could y'all chill out with the off-topic questions? People are here trying to learn. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, y'all can make the comments disappear if you need to, but yeah, if any questions y'all have, put them down here in the ask a question. Our objectives, we're going to be doing settlement. We're going to be looking at what's the difference between a rural and urban settlement? What is megalopolis? What is a mega city? These are all things that can be measured. We're going to look at the interactions that occur from city to city using 3 different models: the rank size rule, the primate city, and the gravity model. All right. Thank you so much, Michaela. I've had it before on my right knee, and it is not fun. And I'm just gonna do what I gotta do to get back. I tore it playing ultimate frisbee. I do that every weekend, and well, you know, all it takes is one wrong step. I got a student asking, can you explain more on development? I'm going to answer that question by saying that yes, at the end of the towards the last review, which is going to be, I want to say, the week prior to the AP exam, the reviews are going to start becoming something that's exclusive for members. All right. So I say that during that week, we're going to actually do a little bit of review on general topics all the way from Unit 1 to Unit 7. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to look just yet, but yes, we will be revisiting some of the topics for development. So if you're going to be with me during those reviews, definitely go ahead and start writing notes and writing questions that you might have that you want me to go over, and I would definitely start with that. Also, while you are practicing for AP Human Geography multiple choice or APHUGs, feel free to write questions down then as well. Okay. What is a settlement? All right, so there's a settlement or urban settlement, or however kind you want to word. A settlement is simply a place with permanent human population. All right, and back in Unit 1 and Unit 2, we talked about this word ecumen, which means that the land where people are able to permanently settle. About the end of the last ice age, all right, around 10,000 years ago, people started to settle in settled societies, and these settlements became kind of like reverse villages in a well. Anyway, they were able to support larger populations. The definition 2 down here is the one I'm looking at. A place typically with that has been uninhabited, where people establish a community. So there's a sense of community here where people are going to live together, work together for their own survival. And this here is going to happen with the invention of agriculture. All right. Today, settlements are very similar in the way they work. All right. So most of human history, people were hunter-gatherers. That shouldn't be new at this point. We talked a little bit about it in agriculture, but settlements began to exist with agriculture as a part of that, kind of like as a byproduct of it. Settler societies allowed for larger populations. So whereas a hunter-gatherer group didn't usually want to have more than, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 people, because it's more mouths to feed, more people to slow you down. Settler communities could actually support larger groups. And so they started to expand and grow. Eventually, you start to see a social hierarchy. All right, so what I mean by that is almost, well, another word is social stratification. In other words, you would have leaders on top, okay, middle rank individuals, and then eventually maybe your peasants or whoever else would be at the bottom of the social structure. And then your earliest settlements were also super small. I have a question. Let's take a look. In what way is urban settlement related to the demographic models, or are they even relatable? You can actually very easily make relations between, I think, the demographic transition model, for example, and what we're looking at with the establishment of these settlements. Keep in mind that when you're looking at demographic transition, all countries up until about the Industrial Revolution were stage 1 countries. All right, and what that's characterized by is really the population growth. So that's the one thing that the demographic transition is going to be really about, is population growth over time. But you start to really see this movement from rural to urban during the Industrial Revolution in places where that took off. So I would say that's probably the biggest connection right there, is that we live today in mostly rural and mostly urban areas globally. That is brand new. It wasn't until I think 2009 that more than half the world's population started to live in urban areas. So yeah, population growth and population models like the demographic transition model do kind of relate to what we're looking at here. Well, and I just answered this question, but I didn't click to start answering. So, oops. Okay, so let's move on. What is a civilization then? Because if we're talking about a settlement being a place where there is community, that's not really the same as civilization. If you guys have taken world history, you may have already studied civilization. And there are these general characteristics that kind of constitute what that is by definition. Google says the stage of human social and cultural development and organization that is considered most advanced. The way you measure that, though, is by a set of characteristics. And this right here comes directly from the world history textbook that we use in my district, the patterns of interaction. And you've got this little wheel that is about the characteristics of civilization. Now, it says insumer, but really these are going to be the characteristics of civilization across the board, all right? And the main thing I want you to take here is that those things we just talked about, the larger populations, the hierarchy, the religion, the writing systems, all these different things are part of these general characteristics of civilization. And so the more you have of these things, the more specialized workers, the more record keeping, the advanced technology, you can kind of build off of that to the point that we finally get to the advanced civilization that we have today, which is filled with technology and computers and the digital age. Last week we were talking about the fourth industrial revolution. That's kind of where we're at, right? So when we talk about complex institutions, we're looking at religion, we're looking at laws and education. Specialized workers are important. Teachers, metal workers, government officials, priests, scribes. Listen, it wasn't until there's enough food for some of those people to have those jobs. Otherwise, everyone would have been having to search out their own food. So specialized worker is definitely a part of what we're going to measure as civilization. And also, notice your advanced cities. You got large populations in cities. I know 50,000 people doesn't seem like a lot today, but it was a lot at the beginning of civilization. So I got a quick question. Let me just take a look real quick. What is your definition of civilization? I would say that what I would say civilization is simply a like a social. It's gonna be essentially a group of people based on those things we just now looked at. Let me go back real quick. Jeez. Yeah, it's anything that's going to consist of what's on this chart here is what I'm going to say is a civilization. Okay, so if you look and measure our own civilization, we have the advanced cities, we have all kinds of complex institutions. It's way more complex than this, but these earlier civilizations consisted of religion, of people with different specialization. I'd say specialization and language is probably the most important of these characteristics. Extra food enabled people to specialize. Rulers made decisions regarding goods and food. And so what you start to see here is that people on the top were able to help decide how best to run the settlements. And so this kind of led to, if your ruler is worth anything and makes good decisions, he's going to put, I guess, the overall good of the group over his own personal thoughts, which is going to really make the food last longer. So people started to build up surplus, like you see in your Mesopotamian cities. Specialization leads to the first service sector. So a few weeks ago, we talked about primary, secondary, and service, or I guess tertiary or service-based economic activities. And so you start to see people make things out of metal, or religious leaders who would pray and be the liaison for the gods, or maybe even your warriors and soldiers. So all these things would be normalized by the complex institutions and also by the writing system, which is some of those characteristics we were just looking at for the characteristics of civilization. Okay, so civilization didn't just emerge anywhere. There's got to be the correct geographic characteristics for that. And so you start to see these civilizations and some of these larger cities emerge in places that you well know by now, like the Yellow River Valley, or the Indus Valley, or the Nile Valley, or the river valleys in Mesopotamia. All these places are going to have some degree of geographic features that's going to make it possible. So they need to have the river valleys to irrigate their fields. They need to have some degree of defense against beasts of the wild beasts or against neighboring civilizations, and they also have to have accessible trade. What you're seeing here is an example of what a city-state would have looked like. I have no idea why I'm coming in echoing. Have no idea. Hopefully it's going to get back to where it needs to be. What you're looking at here is a city-state, all right, from Mesopotamia. Notice it's got the walls on the outside, all right? The settlements are in the inside, and on the outside you've got some of the fields. And so this here is a way they will have defended themselves within the actual settlement. The fields that they're going to do all the work and support themselves with their food are going to be on the outside. And notice also the rivers are very, very close by. Many of these early civilizations comprised of separate city-states. So a city-state is a political unit. So in other words, it's like a state, like a country that has its own sovereignty, and it's basically only going to be the city and then the surrounding territory. So your early civilizations like Mesopotamia was made up of city-states like you see here. All right, Umma, Kish, Uruk, Ur. I want to say Abraham in the Bible was from the city of Ur before he moved over to Palestine. Those city-states usually existed as individual political units. They're often kind of coupled together culturally. And so you start to see, like we talked about the Greek culture, well, or the Greek civilization, but they were definitely organized into a series of city-states, and sometimes they competed with one another. And then you've got your first ever empire under Sargon of Akkad. All right, so Sargon created the first empire ever by taking over basically the Mesopotamian city-states, all right, and bringing them under one leadership. All right, so basically Sumer was and later on, you know, that was the Akkadian Empire. Later on, the Babylonians are going to do the same thing. All right, in many cases, cities become centers of human interaction. All right, so really today, isn't that what cities are? I mean, when you want to go to the city center, you're going there for some reason. You're going there to get something that you can't otherwise get. So if I go to Augusta next week, well, why am I going to go to Augusta for? Well, probably the Masters, or probably to engage in some kind of service out there that I can't otherwise get. My doctor, or I guess my daughter, usually goes to her ear doctor. She has to have some kind of she had ear surgery several years ago. She goes to Charleston because that's where the doctors are that do that kind of work over here in South Carolina. If you live in Georgia, you might go to Atlanta for certain access to services like maybe Six Flags or something that doesn't exist in other places. So cities today, just like they've always been, are going to be places where people go, exchange cultures, exchange goods, exchange services. All right, so the definition in general hasn't ever changed for what a city actually is. I have a question. How large is the typical city-state? Mesopotamia is kind of big on the map. Yes, so to clarify what I'm looking at here, Mesopotamia is kind of big on the map, but look at these little dots. Those are going to be the city-states that I'm talking about. So Mesopotamia is this whole area, also kind of known as the Fertile Crescent, or I guess usually the Fertile Crescent refers to the geographic region, but Mesopotamia is going to be like, I guess, the valley itself. Usually those words are used synonymously. But when you talk about the city-states, you're looking at Kish. You're looking at Umma or Uruk or Ur. Today, modern-day city-states are going to be places like Singapore or places like Monaco. Where those are definitely city-states by definition, and they still exist today. All right. Good questions. So cities are also used as protection from outside forces. What you're looking at here, and definitely Santiago, the Vatican City is a good example of a city-state as well. What you're looking at here is a medieval city. Geez, I can't even remember what it is. Somewhere in France. Really cool little town. Excuse me. But what you got here going around it is going to be a reinforced wall. So this here is an example of a medieval settlement that would have existed. People living on the inside. The walls are going to protect you from the outside. Also, notice that it's somewhat fortified on this somewhat of a hill, right? So I don't know if you guys ever played King of the Hill or King of the Mountain, whatever you want to call it, but basically you're a little kid, you're trying to run up the hill, and when you get there, you try to stop everyone else from getting on. It's a lot easier to defend the hill from the top than it is from the bottom, right? So another example of how these earlier settlements were also a form of protection is this right here is the Acropolis in Athens. So what you're looking at is literally a fortified hilltop. Okay, so there's walls going around built into the hill itself. The enemies would have to go up the hill, and then they would have, you know, you would be able to protect Athens or protect your people and your livelihood from the top of the Acropolis. Okay, y'all, I am so sorry about the issues here. I'm not sure what's going on with the feed. I'm hoping that that's gonna figure itself out. I don't think it's anything on my side. A great source for understanding some of what I'm talking about here is, I don't know if you guys ever read this book called Crispin, The Art of, I guess, the Cross of Lead. Is a kid's literature book about the Middle Ages. This kid who's trying to basically win his freedom from serfdom. But if you ever get a chance to read this, it is a very good book that does a very good job at demonstrating what life would have been like in the Middle Ages. You can get an idea about what a village would look like under feudalism, and you also could see by reading chapter 38 what the medieval town would have been like in terms of what kinds of services would be offered there. So a great quick read that is actually Googleable. If you Google Crispin Cross of Lead, you can find it in PDF and read it that way for free. Rural settlements, just kind of quickly go through this. Vikram, I was talking about this book right here called Crispin, The Art of the Cross of Lead. If you Google that title, you can find that and read chapter 38 to see what the types of services would have been that could have been provided in some of these medieval towns. But rural settlements today, barely under half the world lives in rural areas. So in other words, like probably about 45% or 46, 47% of the world's population is going to live in a rural area. Most of the people that do live in developing countries and are usually going to be farmers, kind of like, I mean, almost like peasants. Rural settlements tend to resemble two basic patterns. You need to know this: rural clustered settlements and also dispersed settlements. And usually your rural dispersed settlements are going to be in more of your MDCs. I'm going to show you examples of both. Clustered settlements are going to refer to, or I guess the words clustered and dispersed, those words refer to like the distribution and the density of where people are going to live. So people are going to live really close together if they're clustered, really far out, or spread apart if they're dispersed. Now, let's look at clustered first. Sometimes you might see this called nucleated. So I would make a note of that. Sometimes it's going to be either called nucleated. I think most people call it clustered. But you can see a linear or a circular pattern. Here's what they look like. This right here would be, either one of these is going to be your circular, your clustered settlements. This one here is more of a circular example. You've got your settlements literally in a circle around each other, and then around them is going to be the farmland. Notice also you've got a church. This here would be a medieval example. Then over here you've got a more linear settlement. Notice the little dots. The black dots represent the people and the settlements living in this little village, and it kind of goes along the meandering river, and then the fields stick out away from the settlements. And then over here you see yet another example of a more of a linear settlement along the river, but the fields in this case kind of go out in one direction. All right. So really, what we're looking at here is the difference between circular, the difference between your linear is simply the pattern in which the land is used. All right. So my picture did not come out as well as I had hoped that it did. But what this actually is the St. Lawrence River in Quebec. What you're looking at is a linear pattern that has kind of existed since the French had been here. So this here is, you can actually go on Google Maps and look up kind of along the St. Lawrence River and see some of these farms and these patterns if you wanted to. And so again, just for clarification, and really you're going to see a lot of different ways these things could look. These are just a few examples of what some of these rural settlements could look like. obviously your circular pattern, linear. You got all kinds of other things here, but I wouldn't work on trying to memorize all the different shapes of a village, but just kind of understand what's going on here in terms of how people cluster themselves and some of the geographic reasons for why they would do that. All right. So small rural settlements. You got these terms that people. I remember my kids would always ask me this stuff. All right. They would ask me things like, what's the difference between a hamlet and a village? The picture right here is basically like a little hamlet. All right, and sometimes they might be maybe a little bigger, a little smaller. But one thing you want to remember is that hamlets usually aren't going to have very many services at all. Villages tend to be slightly larger, but not very, very large in and of themselves. And you might have a little bit more services there. But just think, hamlets are incredibly small settlements, always going to be rural in nature. Let's see some of the comments here. I'm still struggling with the hopefully just. I mean, I don't know. I'm hoping that most of those connectivity issues are going to go away. This here is a blown up picture of the hamlet that I just now showed you. All right, notice it's very rural. You got only a few things going on there. Probably no services. All right, so dispersed rural settlements more common in MDCs. And the reason for this is simply because people are going to use, there's going to be more technology, there's going to be better transportation, there's going to be more of an ability for farmers to get along, I guess, around their land. And so because of all these things, you tend to see more of your dispersed rural settlements in your developed countries. And so what I'm looking at here is this here is kind of going out towards the town of Wagner in South Carolina, which is really close to where I live. And you can see that you've got just huge amounts of farmland and trees and things like this. Very few roads. You've got someone right here. You've got someone else right here. You got someone else right here, and I think that there's probably a house of some sort. This is going to be more of your dispersed rural settlement. All right. Go back to the village and the hamlet slide. Yes, right there. And if you look in like the AMSCO book or any of your review manuals, they're probably going to make a distinction here. I'm pretty sure that Rubenstein in the cultural landscape textbook also kind of talks about these some. But looking at pictures, I think, does a good job at kind of giving you, I guess, an idea of what it is that constitutes what a hamlet is. I know that when I first started teaching the course, I was like, I don't know what a hamlet is. I mean, to be or not to be, right? But indeed, very, very small little settlement with very little services. Okay, so settlements today come in all sizes and all levels of significance. Okay, so the size of a population tends to amplify the geographic phenomenon that occurs in those cities. So here's a few things that you can use to kind of measure what I mean. And we're going to look at all of them. We're going to look at the gravity amount, distance decay, migration, cultural varieties. All of these things are going to be different, and I guess amplified the larger your city is. So if you look at New York City, for example, there's going to be all sorts of cultural variety. There's going to be people from all over the world migrating to that place. There's going to be more people from further out that are going to interact with it in some way, shape, or form. There's going to be different kinds of unique services there that aren't going to be anywhere else. And so these are all examples of how a population and size of city can kind of exasperate what you're going to get. If we go back to the little town of Wagner that I was just now at, you're not going to see many people moving in. You're not going to see a whole lot of cultural variety. It's a smaller town. They're all going to be more or less the same. All right, and services. There's literally a McDonald's there. You got to go to the library to get. No, I'm sorry. Did I say there's a McDonald's? There's not a McDonald's there. There's like a Piggly Wiggly and a library. That's it. Blew my mind whenever I was talking to someone about that the other day. Got a question. Can they be a part of each other, like a hamlet be a part of a city or a town be a part of a bigger city? Also, can they develop into each other, like a hamlet becoming a village? All right. Oh, hang on. All right. So for the sake of what I'm talking about today, and just for vocab's sake, let's think of them as something different, but I understand what you're saying. All right, so like you might have a city that's a really big city, and then right outside that city might be a smaller city or a smaller town that is really in a way kind of like a suburb of that. And that's kind of what maybe some of the cities around Columbia would be in South Carolina. So for the sake of what we're talking about with hamlets and villages, I'm going to say no, but we are going to talk in later weeks about edge cities. as part of the galactic model. And so we'll be looking at how you might have some cities kind of on the side of a larger city that becomes its own thing. And so that would be kind of the closest to what I think your question is asking that we're going to get. And we will get there definitely in coming weeks. That might be even next week when we're looking at the different models. All right. So world cities. One of the classifications of cities, sometimes you will see this word world city or global city. And the most important of them, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, New York City, Tokyo, and London. Hands down, these are the most significant global cities in the world. And the reason is because they're very, very important politically as well as economically, but mainly economically. All right, New York City is the headquarters of the United Nations. Tokyo and London, they are the biggest, I guess, culture centers and service centers in their part of the world. If you look at these things on a map, you're going to see that they're relatively evenly spaced. There's New York, there's London, there's Tokyo. All right, and so you can almost draw like a cylinder around it, going north to south, and see more or less just the realm of influence of these cities. And I'm not saying that other cities aren't as influential, they are, but those are the most important global cities. Other really important global cities are going to be your Chicago, LA, Shanghai, Dubai is a huge place in the Middle East. Singapore, one of the city-states in East Asia, that was one of the Asian tigers, all right? Seoul, the capital of South Korea, and Sydney in Australia. And there's a map again that shows maybe not. I wouldn't say that. I mean, if that's not all the world cities, then that's a lot of them. There might be others that are worth mentioning. But here's the key, though, is that it's never going to be about knowing all these cities and knowing what they are, but just having an idea geographically of the significance of some of these larger places. New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles are the three largest cities in the country. Sydney is exclusively the largest city in Australia. You've got some of these larger cities, Tokyo being the largest city in the world right there. Seoul, Shanghai, these are some of your more burgeoning urban areas along the eastern coast of China. It's good to know them. London and Paris, obviously, and in Berlin, but some of your most important, most influential cities in Europe. There's also megalopolis. All right, so if we in population, we talked a little bit about this. You've got this large, very densely urban area that is more or less one city kind of built into and kind of extension of continual urbanization from Boston to Washington, D.C. Right? Sometimes you might see that called the Bosch-Wash corridor. Right? But usually we call this megalopolis, and it is the most densely, most urbanly, I guess, population dense region in the United States. But it's characterized simply by the nonstop urbanization. Sometimes you also see this word conurbation to refer to a megalopolis region, and it's not the only place on Earth. The Bosch-Wash corridor is not the only place where you see this phenomenon. There are other places just in the United States. Probably one of the most influential, I guess, definitely to me in my region would be this area from Atlanta to North Carolina. So you've got, again, just almost like continual urbanization. You've got the Silicon Valley region over here. You've got some of these other spots. The Great Lakes is a very, very densely populated area. It's becoming more and more of like a continuous city. I've got some questions. Let's take a look. All right. Are they based on like financial powers, media, power, politics, power, or no? That reflects why they were world cities. Yes, all of those things. All right. The probably the most important thing would be the economic side. All right. So New York is going to be the place where there's you've got your Wall Street, all right, your banks. You've got the United Nations. I would say those two things right there make New York incredibly important. It's also a cultural center as well. London and Tokyo would kind of be the same thing in their respective regions. So yes, that's exactly what it is. Just answer that. For the next question, does Moscow count as a megalopolis? No, not by itself, because Megalopolis is gonna be like a like what you're looking at here, where you've got multiple cities like Boston and Washington D.C., and they kind of build into one another. So that if you're driving from Washington along this stretch, it's gonna be like you're never gonna not see city, right? So that's really what we mean by conurbation or by a megalopolis. That's what the word refers to. I don't think that Moscow is a megacity either. We'll have to look at that in just a moment. But that's a different definition. Are LDCs starting to develop more into urbanization, even if they have fewer resources? Yes, 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 and more yes. In fact, you're seeing a huge amount of urbanization in some of these areas. We're going to look at megacities in a moment, and we're going to learn that most megacities today exist in developing countries, and they are continuing to grow. You're continuing to emerge. I mean, you're seeing where cities like Lagos, for example, in Nigeria, are going to just going to be huge, but they're growing in a different way, and there's going to be a lot more poverty and a lot less resources, and so they're going to have more, I guess, more amplified issues that they have to deal with than other cities. But we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Okay, well, I'm done with that one. I think I might have one more. Megalopolis and world cities usually in core countries. Not necessarily. Yes, I guess so far that's been the case with your with either one of them. But yeah, you got places like in China around Shanghai and all that. You're starting to see a little bit of both there. Okay, Shanghai being a very important global city, as well as kind of the megalopolis or the conurbation phenomenon. What you're looking at here is a list of the top 10. I want to say the top 10 largest, I guess, most populous cities in the world. And this here is definitely looking at their metropolitan areas. So it's not just looking at the city itself, but the point still remains. These are massive population clusters. And of this group, a lot of them are going to be world cities. All right. The largest urban areas in 1950, all right, are going to be your New York, London, Tokyo. All right, so they're still up there. But notice, look at this. All right, now this one here is looking at not the metropolitan areas. You can tell that right off the bat, because if you look at New York, the population has increased a lot, but it hasn't increased that much. But look at the difference here between where Tokyo is going to be and where Tokyo is on the first map. Now this one here is current. All right, this chart here is looking at the current top, I guess, 11, because I cut it off at Shenzhen, places in the world. A lot of them are going to be in Asia, in China in particular, but these here are extremely populous areas. So if you look at what we were just now talking about with the I guess, expanded urbanization in MDCs versus LDCs, in Asia, where the population really, I guess, urbanization occurred a lot in the anywhere really between the 1960s and on up. Some of these countries, like, or some of these cities like Shenzhen, for example, was just like a nothing place. Maybe back in 1970, definitely by 2000, it was a massive metropolitan region. So the reason I'm showing you this is to kind of show you that New York City used to be unrivaled as the largest city, except for London, which was right up there with it. Moscow is up there with 7 million, but I want to talk a little bit about megacities, because that's kind of what we're getting into with this. A megacity is a country that's a city that's going to have. Let me hit this. I never hit the done answering button. A megacity is anything that's any city that's got more than 10 million people in it. Okay, so that's kind of like the cutoff. And so, did I miss a slide here, or did I just leave it out? I thought I had a slide about megacities in here. There it is. I just skipped it. A megacity is going to be any city with more than 10 million people. So that's the cutoff there. And there's not a whole lot of megacities. And that's the reason why I'm showing you this. In the 1950s, there weren't more than 2, really. Tokyo would have been up there a little bit later. But now, if you look at this, all right, every single one of these cities is going to be a megacity. And then there's even more. I think that there are 37 cities today in the world that have more than 10 million people living in them. Notice New York is number 10 on this one. New York is number 1 in 1950. So in just about 70 years, you're going to see this major shift where New York's population has grown, but not substantially compared to places like Shanghai and places like Seoul, Korea, and all that. Megacities are going to be, megacities are going to be more prevalent in periphery countries. So your LDCs are going to have, you're going to see more of them in those places, and the reason is because of the interregional migration that's occurring there from rural to urban. Most people in MDCs already live in rural areas. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Most people in MDCs already live in urban areas. It's the people in LDCs that are still predominantly living in rural regions, but they're moving into urban areas as they search out better jobs and more access to services and opportunities that are starting to exist as those countries develop more. Still, megacities today, and really any city, is gonna have the same kind of problems regardless of where they live. It's just that the difference here being that richer countries have more resources with which to tackle these problems, and the problems are going to be anything ranging from ethnic or cultural or religious differences or tension. Wealth divisions is a big deal. Even in our country, we're talking about that more and more. So you're going to hear, I promise, you're going to hear Bernie Sanders talking about the top 10% of the top 10 or 5% of the 0.3% of the world. He's talking about like a few hundred people that own like almost half the U.S. economy. You've got wealth division. We just said that. Joblessness, okay. Sometimes homelessness, infrastructure concerns. So yeah, we got people that are talking about how bad infrastructure is in our cities. You look at a place, in Africa like Lagos, and talk to me about infrastructure issues. So we have the same problems no matter where you are in the world if you're living in a megacity. But the difference is the way you tackle them and the access to resources that you might have or might not have access to. And then obviously there are huge environmental concerns, and that is kind of first and foremost in our news, politics, and media, regardless of what you feel about that. That's something that's a hot topic issue right now, and there's a lot of people in the world. Last week we talked a little bit about the Millennial Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals that are going till 2030. Part of the thing that they're trying to focus on is how do you tackle these issues in our cities, because that's where people are going to. Now, one of the main differences between a megacity in a place like the United States and a megacity in a place like Nigeria is going to be these squatter settlements kind of along the periphery or the outside of the city. Now, next week, we're going to be talking about models, and you'll look at 3 urban development models and probably more than that, that talk a little bit about what happens at different rings or sectors within a city. But for the poorer cities that places like Africa and Asia, like Delhi, India, and other places like this, you're going to have a lot of these kind of ramshackle, thrown together settlements on the outside of the city called squatter settlements. And these are any collection of buildings where people have no legal right to land they're built on, and the people are also they don't own the land. They have very little access to clean water and sanitation or electricity. And so there's going to be a lot of issues with that you're going to see in poor countries. You don't see it like this in richer countries. Usually in places in MDCs, the poorest people kind of live right kind of along the city center, and sometimes they live right on the streets or in certain areas designated for them kind of in the city center, not so much on the outside. Squatter settlements were common in the Great Depression. Not like they are. It wouldn't be the same as what you're seeing here in the pictures. Let's look at some of the pictures here. This here is kind of what I'm looking at. And this here is Rio de Janeiro. It's the largest of its kind, and it's really you see a lot of pictures of this particular place in movies and popular culture. But if you look at this, all the buildings are kind of thrown together. They don't look like Legos. I mean, it looks almost like just everything's askew. Electricity is kind of rigged up. There's not as much access to, there's no planning. So the roads are really narrow, and you can't really get through it very easily. You see, sometimes it's called favela. All right, so sometimes like in Call of Duty, you got the favela stage. Holy mess, we can rack up some kills. Yeah, so this one here, favela is the same as a squatter settlement. A shanty town is another word for squatter settlement. I would know all three of those. Usually when you use the word favela, it's in reference to a shanty town or a squatter settlement within Latin America, right? And then you've also got Fast Five with Vin Diesel kind of rummaging around in the crime-laden region of this particular squatter settlement, and I want to say he was in Mexico in the movie, if I remember correctly. It's been a while. All right, so I've got some questions here that popped up. Are any millennial goals related questions going to appear in the exam? I don't know the answer to that. However, it is absolutely in the course description for the AP Human Geography College Board course description. There's never been an FRQ about the MDGs, and so a lot of people kind of speculate that, well, it's just maybe they're going to have an MDG question for the FRQ. The thing is, MDGs were actually technically over with in 2015, and now they've been replaced with the SDGs. So I'm not going to sit here and say that there's not going to be an MDG question on the FRQ, because it could be. It's in the course description, but I would like to think that if it was going to be in that on the test, they would make some kind of connection with the next 15 years for the SDGs. So if I was studying the MDGs, I would at least be familiar with how that transition is going to look. For multiple choice, absolutely, it's fair game. For either one of them, it's fair game. Are squatter settlements the next? Let's see. Squatter settlements are the next to big urbanization, like the next big cities. Okay. Squatter settlements are extremely common in the largest and most urbanizing, most growing cities today. And part of the reason is because the migration waves to those cities and the search for opportunities they might find there are extremely big. There's a lot of demand for people to go to these cities. And so they're going there really fast. And the city doesn't really have the resources to adjust to those kinds of surges of people. And so maybe that's one way of looking at it. But yes, squatter settlements actually expand more rapidly than any other part of the city when you're looking at places like Lagos, Nigeria. There's a fantastic video series about megacities from the Daily Conversation on YouTube, and it talks a little bit about that as well. That's going to be listed in the resources at the end of the slide. Are squatter settlements kind of equivalent to suburbs in developed countries? They are the same in that they are kind of outside of the city center. They're different in that suburbs are usually kind of linked to our cultural, I guess, our historical definition of being well-to-do, of living a good middle-class lifestyle, and that is everything but what you're seeing in a squatter settlement. So really, that I wouldn't think of them as the same, except that geographically, squatter settlements are going to be on the very outside, the far periphery of a city, whereas usually some of the suburban areas are going to be outside of the central business district, but not quite on the far outside of the city itself. Maybe next week will make more sense when you're looking at some of these urban models, like, for example, the concentric zone model or the Hoyt sector model. But it's similar in that they are going to be in different places based on the urban land use. But other than that, they're not really the same. Also, are there going to be many questions on squatter settlements? There could absolutely be questions on squatter settlements. I don't know how they would. Heck, there might have been. There might have been. I can't remember if there was ever an FRQ that kind of overlapped with this or not, to be quite honest. But yes, it's in the course description. There definitely could be test questions about it for sure. If you guys haven't ever seen that course description, if you go and Google AP Human Geography course description or course articulation or however you want to say it, you could actually pull up that document and look at it. Maybe we'll yeah, I would definitely Google it and I'll somehow get that to you guys. Maybe after this presentation, I'll put it in the comments what page to look at for that and how to find the unit outline. It's a little bit further, about halfway through the course descriptions, where you'll see the outline. It's going to tell you just the indicators of what you need to know. And what's the thumbnail from? You know what? We got masterminds over at Five that puts together all of our thumbnails. If that's what you're talking about, it's one of our geniuses. If you're talking about the HD here, this here is from Fast 5. Okay. Would squatter settlements be classified as hamlets or villages, or is it its own classification? All right, so no, a squatter settlement is going to be part of a city. In this case, we're actually looking at mega cities. So so no, it would be actually a part of the mega city itself, not really its own thing. Does that make sense? So it's more of part of the outside of the city itself. Aren't favelas and shantytowns mainly in Latin America? Like, what about the Griffin Ford model talks about? In Latin America, they call it favelas. And so usually when you're seeing that terminology, you're talking about a Latin American city. And yes, it's absolutely in the Latin American model, also known as the Ford Griffin model. And it is the periferico. So if you look at that model, what they call the periferico or the periphery, anything that's going to be in that color would be part of that squatter settlement. But it's not exclusive to Latin America at all. Are there important people that relate to this certain topic? Off the top of my head, no, not other than the geographers that come up with the names of the model. So you might want to know. I mean, you definitely want to know the sector model by Homer Hoyt. You want to know the concentric zone model by Harris, Chauncey Harris. You want to be able to. I'm sorry, did I say that? The Burgess. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Burgess with the concentric zone. Chauncey Harris and Ullman with the multiple nuclei model. Other than that, though, I mean, no, I don't think you should be worried so much about people associated with this as much as the spatial characteristics of the cities themselves. All right, we're gonna go ahead and let's go ahead and move on a little bit. Let's move on. So what's the connection between cities? Well, what assumptions can be made with relation to interactions between urban areas, and what can a country's urban areas tell us about the way people live in these cities? Y'all, we're going to talk about some of the models that go along with, and not like the urban models I just mentioned, but more so like the rank size rule, the gravity model. We're going to look at the primate city and kind of characterize cities in a way of trying to help us understand how people live in those countries. Let me take a quick swig. All right. So gravity model. All right. So we all know the law of gravity. Isaac Newton is discovers gravity. Well, what we're looking at here isn't really that scientific in that way, but what it looks at is that there is a pull between larger cities, and the larger the city is, and the distance that it is from another city is going to determine the gravity that they share with one another. And weirdly, there is actually a mathematical formula for how to measure and calculate the gravity between two cities. Now, I don't think you need to know that for the test, but we are just going to look at it in a way of trying to understand what it's trying to show you. Simply, if you look at New York City and Los Angeles, the number one and number two largest cities in the United States, and you look at the amount of people they have there. In other words, you multiply the population, multiply together the two populations, you get a ridiculously large number. All right, and then divide that number by the distance between them squared. So you're going to take this product, and then you're going to divide it by this number here, which is a square of the amount of miles between them. And then once you get to this point, you can break it down by the millions and figure out that there's going to be a relationship between the two that's measured as 52.9. Now, that number doesn't really tell me a lot, and that's the reason why I don't think that the math is as important when it comes to understanding the gravity model. But you do absolutely need to know that it has to do with the larger population and the distance between. So what I'm trying to say here is that if a place like Atlanta with a massive population I guess if you're looking at the gravity between Atlanta and another city like Chicago, it's going to be bigger on the basis of the populations. But if you're looking at a place like, I don't know, let's say my hometown of Lexington. You guys probably have never heard of Lexington, South Carolina, but it's very, very small compared to something like Chicago or Atlanta. And then you try to measure the gravity that it has with a place like Atlanta. It's going to be very small because population in Atlanta, I guess the population in Lexington is very, very small. So there's not going to be as much of a pull between. While it can be great for estimating and predicting migrations, which is really and tourism and workers and regional shoppers. That's really what it's used for. It's not the end all. That doesn't always. It doesn't completely determine. I guess the gravity between the two cities. Okay, so what's the mathematical formula? Okay, so let's look at it. It's right here. All right, so it would be, if you're writing it out in a formula, and I should have included it in here. It would be population 1 times population divided by the distance squared. All right, so it would be population 1 times population 2 divided by distance squared. Now, once you get, once you divide this number by this number, the population times the population divided by the distance squared, it's going to come up with a massive number that you can round it. I guess you can move the decimal over to the millions place, right? So if you move it over to the millions place, it's going to make the rest of the math a little easier to do, right? We can shorten our math by reducing the numbers to the millions place. You got, what is it, 20, where did that number come from? Okay, so the population. All right, so you can use the millions place when you're doing the math. So instead of doing 20 million times 15 million, you could take 20.12 times 15.78 and then divide that by 6.06, right? Is that what? Yeah. And then you can get basically a rough estimate of what that gravity between the two is going to be. That's really how the model works. But the point here is that it's trying to say that there is a bigger interaction, a bigger connection between larger population places than there is between smaller places. And that distance, or distance decay, also plays into this. So if you're looking at the distance, I guess the gravity between Los Angeles and Chicago, it might, I don't know, it might even be bigger than New York, because you got another large population, but the distance, it might be a little bit closer. Probably not enough to count, to be honest. So what I would encourage you to do, and what I would have my students do, and we would do this in class, is look at a map. Right, find a couple of cities that are really close together. Maybe 2 cities in one state, for example, or maybe New York and Washington, D.C. And use this formula to determine what the gravity would be based on the distance between. You don't have to have scientific distance. You can use Google Maps to find out how far, how many miles it would be. So you could do that if you wanted to. The population is really easy. All you got to do is Google that and you'll figure it out. So I would encourage you guys to go in and test this, and try to figure out what the relationship would be. But I guess the main thing that we're using it for is to kind of determine the general movement between cities, which it can be used for really well. But it doesn't always, this isn't always going to be accurate, because you might have a place like, for example, I was just talking about Augusta, right? Next week is the Augusta National. Well, how many people do you think are going to be going to Augusta? I'll give you a hint. It's not just going to be people in South Carolina and Georgia. It's going to be people from clear all over the world. When I used to drive for a company out there, I would be driving around these Australians that come down every single year. The same group of people. I drive them year after year, and they watch the Masters. They play a heck of a lot of golf themselves. Y'all, if you use the gravity model to measure how many people are going to be interacting with Augusta, it would not be accurate for next week, because there are other factors involved. Like, for example, if you want to look at the Masters, you're not going to be able to do that anywhere other than Augusta. So other places where sometimes the gravity model isn't going to be accurate is like Orlando. It's like the theme park capital of the world right there. Disney World and everything else. Mecca being the pilgrimage to the Kaaba. Las Vegas, a very a gambling hotspot or a vacation hotspot. Venice, a huge tourist place. It's got a lot of history there of Europe. Jerusalem, a pilgrimage point for Jews, Christians, Muslims alike. I got some questions. I've already answered the mathematical formula one. Sorry, I didn't address that earlier. Small compared to Miami. Natalia, I'm afraid that I have forgotten the context of your question there. I'm sorry. If you would like to re-ask it, or I might have already addressed it, but feel free to put it in there with a little bit more context. And thank you very much. Okay. So now that's the gravity model, all right? And it's used to measure the interaction, the pull between two places, two cities. The rank size rule, all right, is it's super confusing when you're trying to read what it means. I had a teacher just the other day ask me, maybe in her first year teaching the class, and I remember struggling because I'm like, I'm not a math guy, but the nth largest city will be 1N. What the heck does that even mean? All right, simply, the largest city in the United States is what? Y'all put in the comments. What's the largest city in the United States? I've said it a few times already. NYC. Woo! All right. So it's the largest place in the United States in terms of a city. All right. So the second largest city in the United States is going to be Los Angeles. What's the third largest city in the United States? Bam. Good job, Timothy. Chicago. Okay. So we got the first, second, and third largest. So the nth largest city would be 1 in the population of the largest city. The largest city in the region is going to be New York. Let's say that there's about 20 million people in New York, somewhere around there, I'm pretty sure. Can't remember exactly off the top of my head. Let's say there's 20 million people living in New York. Then what's going to be the approximate location, the approximate size of LA based on this formula? If there are 20 million people in New York, then according to the rank size rule, there would be 1/2 of the population, because Los Angeles is going to be the second largest. So it would be, if it's the second largest, then it would be 1/2 or 1/2 the population in New York City. Exactly. Yes. So what then would be the population of Chicago? Well, it would be the third largest city, would be 1/3 the population of New York. So it would be roughly about 7 or 8 million people. Now, this is really, really weird when you start looking at this and thinking, well, it can't possibly be. But then you look at a chart like this one right here, and you can kind of see, well, it's not exact science, but it's close enough to get you scratching your chin, right? So here are these maps a little bit more blown up. Charts a little bit more blown up. The United States, notice you got 20 million people here in New York City, okay? And right, let's see, this right here is gonna be your Los Angeles. Now look. I know that it's weird. This chart does not look, it's not the scale. I wouldn't have written it like this. But notice that this is 10 million. This is half of 20 million, right? So number 2 is LA. It's about 10 million people. Number 3 is about 7 million people. Number 4, which I believe is Austin, Texas, is about 6 million people, and so on and so forth. Now, you get far enough down the line, and it doesn't matter anymore, okay? And the point isn't because they're supposed to be systematic or exact math. Actually, the point is totally different from that. The point is that it means something for your country as a whole whenever it follows this rule. All right, so this right here is a region. We're looking at just Louisiana. All right, so Louisiana follows the rank size rule. If you look at the current rank size ideal, I'm sorry, wait, I might be wrong. Look a little closer. All right, so the red line represents the current ideal, the exact math. Notice that by 2010, it's not exact math, but it's a little bit closer to that line than it had been in 1940 and 1960. What does that mean? Okay, simply, the rule has some important spatial implications. Look at your location, I guess your situation of New York, Chicago, and where is it? Los Angeles, okay? So here's the thing that I want y'all to think about. Yeah, there's a lot of space between Los Angeles and Chicago, but y'all remember when you're learning about population, how you've got like that, the population center of the United States kind of creeps along and does this number right here, and it's kind of like somewhere around there would be like the population middle point for the country. Well, if you keep in mind that kind of the fact that the West is kind of growing a little bit and the East is where a lot of people live, the services that you find in these large cities are spread out, and it means that they're more accessible to the majority of people. It also means that if you're going to have cities like Chicago in the dead center of the country, and cities like LA that's really big and really well developed in the West, and in the East you've got your megalopolis region, it means that there's good infrastructure for getting around the country. There's good trade networks. There's equal access to opportunities. You don't have to go to New York City to go to college, do you? You can go to college in other places. So we have a lot of cities in our country that offer these services to a lot of people, which means that there's also a better distribution of wealth in our country. People have access to goods, opportunities. They have access to things like services or healthcare. You don't have to go to your state's capital, or I guess the nation's capital, in order to access healthcare. So that's what the rank size rule implies. If your country follows that, it means that people have access to the things they might need in order to live well. And so you remember we talked about the Human Development Index. This right here would be maybe an indication in and of itself of how well people are going to live. The opposite of this would be the primate city rule. And you know what? We're not actually talking about monkeys, but the primate city rule, and people think, primate, you think monkey, but what it means is that there is going to be a very large city, a primate city within the country that is usually going to be twice the population of the next largest city, at least. Usually more than that, but you might also have it usually being more than 2 times the significance. So there's a huge amount of economic significance with these primate cities. And I'll give you a few examples, actually. The first one is Mexico. So Mexico City's population is more than New York, but the next most populous city in the country is only 5 million people. And then way down here, past number 10, you're only looking at a few cities with around 1 million people right there. So this chart here might spell it out a little bit better. If you look at Thailand, Bangkok is a primate city. Look at how much bigger the population in Bangkok is than literally every other city. All right. So if you need to go and get the best medical care, where are you gonna go to get it? You're probably gonna end up getting that from Bangkok. Or where are you gonna get the access to services you can't get anywhere else? Bangkok. What about the best education? Bangkok. So it goes to show that perhaps the wealth, perhaps the economy isn't as evenly distributed across the country. Now, there is other things you might want to think about, and that is Thailand is not a very large city. Mexico is. I'm sorry, I say it correctly. Thailand is not a very large country. Mexico is. And when Mexico City is that much bigger than everything else, then you start to realize that, well, Mexico, they do have uneven access to services. They have uneven wealth distribution. People living in Mexico City, especially in the center of that city, are usually well off, really well off, control most of the country's wealth. People that live anywhere else in the country usually don't enjoy the kind of status and wealth and prestige as you can get in Mexico City. Here are some other examples of primate cities. All you do, I mean, I literally just Google primate city list, and there you go. You get a bunch of different examples here. Wikipedia is on point. Notice that London and Paris are primate cities. Now, here's the thing, though. Well, I just now said that Mexico City is really well off. The rest of the country is probably not that much, at least not compared to Mexico City. But in London and Paris, you don't see that. So why not? Well, primate cities indicate certain spatial and economic characteristics. I mean, I just talked about this, and I'll go back to it after I make my point. But if you look at London and Paris, all right, they're both primate cities, but it's a relatively small geographic territory. You don't have to travel super far in order to get to these places. So if there are services you can't find anywhere else, it's no problem to go to London and Paris again. The infrastructure and communication networks are good. And so there's an even distribution of wealth and services and access and opportunities in other parts of those countries. In places like Mexico, there might be uneven distribution of wealth. There's going to be lack of infrastructure outside of the primate city and even on the periphery where the development is not as good. And then there's also going to be unavailable of certain resources and services outside of the city. So there's a bunch of things here you can that I guess there's a bunch of implications about whether or not your country follows the rank size rule or whether or not it is more of a primate city. I have a question. Is the periphery model involved also? Also, what is it? Also, ignore the mind. All right, great. So yeah, the periphery model. It depends on what you mean by that. All right. So a lot of times, you got the world systems theory that's sometimes called that. I think what you're talking about with the periphery model, if I'm not mistaken, is that is another term for, I might have to check this. That's another term for the galactic city model or the edge city model. I think it's also sometimes called that. And what that simply means, and you're looking at that more so next week, is that there's going to be a city on the outside of a city itself, like a larger chunk of that city that kind of takes on all the characteristics of being its own independent city with its own central business district. Next week, we're going to look at that a little bit more, and that should clarify. I'm almost certain that that's what you mean there by the periphery model. So let me go ahead and indicate that I answered that. Okay, almost done, y'all. I appreciate y'all sticking with me. It went a little over this time. That's fine, but we're almost there. Actually, we are there. I kind of finished very abruptly there. Sorry for the non-transition there to the end. I've got some really cool resources for you here. And obviously, if y'all have any other questions, I can talk a little bit more. Y'all had a lot of really good questions here. And I've definitely appreciated y'all's questions. If y'all have any more, I'll be on just for a few more minutes. I can look at those for sure. Or if you want to put more in the question, I can definitely talk about those with you as well. But this rank size rule is an article that shows you how the rank size rule is applied to the state of Louisiana. I think that's pretty cool, because one of the things that I want y'all to think about with this is that you're never going to see a mathematically perfect rank size rule application. But sometimes when you look at different scales, you can see it really, really close. And so sometimes you can look at the state level. If you look at the rank size rule, looking at the European core, sometimes you can apply it to that as well. So there are different ways you can look at it at different scales, and that's the reason why I wanted y'all to see that article. The 6.3, that's a Dan Snyder video. He does a fantastic job at summarizing the primate city and rank size rule. So if you have any other questions about that, or want a different perspective on it, or still crave more, go take a look at that free video on YouTube. He has a very good YouTube channel. The what are the world's largest cities? I can't remember where that came from. I think that's a video on megacities. That's what that is. So it talks about, it's a 2-minute clip about megacities. Does a really good job at giving you a summary of that. And then this right here, this last one, that right there is the complete season all rolled into one video by the Daily Conversation about these megacities. So if you have any other questions about megacities, you got some really good sources there. I definitely recommend watching a few of these, just as you're folding clothes or doing some homework on the side. Never too much information. Go take a practice test and get studied up. You're welcome for the information. I appreciate you guys staying with me and listening, and I'm going to miss you over the next few weeks. And when I come back, I'll probably be in a world of agony, but I'm going to give it my best and get you guys ready for the test, because we'll only have a few more weeks at that point. Haven't gotten to this unit, but I understand it. Also, where'd you get that cat playing? I make my own shirts. I love to make geography themed shirts. The one I wore last week is actually a picture of my own face, and it's a meme I made. So I wear it every single time my students would take a FRQ, and it says, "Did you study? Did you do the reading and study for the test? Well, you should do fine," or something to that effect. So I make a lot of shirts, and that's exactly what this is. Yes, Michaela, I appreciate it. You do the same. Thanks a lot, Mercedes. If you want to take a test, go to collegeboard.com. I don't know if they have a free a test for that students can access. Your teacher can access some of the free tests, and hopefully we'll use that to give you guys a practice test. However, I will say that they can't let you take that home. I mean, they can, but it'll be a violation of the policies around that. This actually helps a lot, so I appreciate, even if I was going off topic here, I still get good notes. Aiden, I appreciate it, man. Luke, you're gonna be missed, brother. I appreciate y'all thinking about me during that time. It's gonna hurt. I've had it done before, and it is not fun. I wish I could turn back the clock and not tear my ACL. I can tell you how many times I've said that. Sucks. So thanks, and sorry for off-topic comments. No problem, Aiden. I appreciate you being with us. I got a few of y'all still on. I'm gonna take just a quick second, real quick, while I got you, because I meant to do this earlier. I didn't. I want to show you the course description real quick. Emmanuel, man, I hope that you have already been recovered from that, and you've just done it apparently. It hurts, and the surgery is a bear. It was last year. Yeah. Are you back in the game now? Let me see if I can just pull it up on Natalia. I hope it does too. I appreciate you guys thinking about me. Let me see if I can pull it up. I might not be able to find it. This isn't my, there it is. APHUG geography course description. Bam. So if you guys are interested in trying to identify your weak points, or at least know what you need to know, or for the test, that this here is the course description. When your teachers teach it, they hopefully are teaching you guys all this stuff, and they know that, and I'm sure that they are doing their best. Oh geez, how in the world do I? Okay. So if you scroll down, notice the page of the top. I am on page 23. Starts the curriculum articulation. So if you want to know what it is that you need to do, yeah, I'll put the link right there actually in the chat so y'all can access it. This here is a link to the things that you need to know. If it is on this list, I promise you, it is fodder for the AP exam. You very well may see it on the AP exam. Now, another thing you can do is, just for strategy's sake, you can go through and maybe look at some of the older FRQs. Like last year, there was a question about gentrification. There was a question about terminology in popular culture. That's the one that I graded. There was 2 years ago, there was a question on new urbanism, and maybe a few years before that, federalism. You can bet your bottom dollar that if they ask a question like that again, it's going to be a different take on that topic. I'm not going to say that they will or won't. I'm saying that I'm not counting on there being a gentrification FRQ this time, because there was just a gentrification FRQ. So questions that have never been asked. There's never been a question about the central place theory, which we're going to talk about next week. There's never been a question about the Millennial Development Goals, and maybe a few others as well. I'm not good at remembering all this stuff, to be honest. But those are definitely two questions that there's never been a question about. So take a look at the course articulation. It goes all the way from Unit 1, all right, Unit 2, Unit 3, and 4, and so on. It tells you all these different things, the learning objectives, and then these little indicators here. And also, if you look, it'll even tell you where you'll be able to see examples on the College Board documents. Again, y'all don't have access to these. Your teachers do. Sadly, you can probably find them, but your teachers are supposed to be able to have these that they might use for whatever purpose. So ask your teacher about a practice test if you need to. All right. Don't let the college professors teach human geo come up with the questions. Natalia, they are created by a lot of different people. I know there is a specific panel of individuals that write FRQs. It changes over time. So I've known a few of the people that have written FRQs. I know that if you guys use the iScore5 app, which is like, I think it's a $5 or $6 app that has human geography and as well as a few other things. I know that the creator of that app personally, I know that those individuals, him as well as the others, absolutely were question writers for the FRQ. For the multiple choice, I believe that it's kind of done the same way, but I know that you're super forbidden from ever talking about the multiple choice after you take it. And the reason for that is because sometimes they will reuse those questions, is my understanding, over time. And so yes, they don't rewrite all the questions, but they definitely have a huge bank of questions that they might be pulling for these topics. Usually it's going to be about, give or take, about somewhere between 13 to 17% of the test is going to be each unit, with Unit 1 being about 7 to 10% of the test. All right. Practice test for Miss Bennett's giving a practice test. So y'all be ready for that after school one day towards the end of April. All right, that is great. Man, if I thought I could get there, I'd come there for pizza and take a practice test. That's awesome. So, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I appreciate y'all being with me for an hour and 20 minutes. I'm going to go have my surgery, get myself better, and I'll see you guys in a few weeks. Be here next week for Amanda. She is awesome. I don't know if y'all are here at the very beginning, but she's already done a few of the earlier human geography before they hired me on. So I would love to visit San Antonio. I don't get out much, so maybe one of these days I'll do like Tom Ritchie and go somewhere and teach geography all over the country. So we will see. I appreciate the invite, though. I'll look for you if I'm ever in San Antonio. Y'all have a good night.